Warning, this episode may contain content that is not suitable for children. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to LED Live, the show where we use the light of Christ to expose the darkness found in media and our culture today. And today we're doing a highly requested video on a very controversial movie, but this is the show, this is what we do, so we're gonna have some fun. We want to welcome Michael Bonanno to the show from Florida. Thank you so much for joining us in this discussion.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about, is Joker harmless or is it the most triggering movie of 2019?
Find out on this episode of LED Live.
So if you've been watching us from week to week and are wondering how you can support us, one of the ways is on Patreon, and the link is in the description below. We have a bunch of perks on there, from behind the scenes to t-shirts, exclusive t-shirts, and stickers and whatnot. And speaking of supporters, we want to give a big shout out to Amelia from New Mexico. She sent us these awesome tumblers.
These things are
Thank
awesome.
you so much.
Cheers.
One for each of us.
Keeping us warm on this cold day.
Yeah.
We even got our
For
names
sure.
on them so that you
I
guys
know.
don't drink out of
Seriously.
my cup.
That's right. I love it.
So we want to give a big shout out to her, and we thank you all for your love and for your support. If you're looking at Scotty and Mike and you're like, man, those are some awesome t-shirts they're
Oh
wearing.
yeah, I'm representing today
Oh,
too.
yeah.
Keith
Pray for your
represents-
haters.
Pray for all
haters.
those haters on this video.
Oh, that's true.
That's smart,
Good shirt.
That's smart. You thought about this one.
You can find those links in the bar below. It really helps us out as a ministry, and it helps to share the gospel, to wear your witness in a cool and fashionable way. So today, we're just going to jump right into it. We're talking about Joker. Have you guys ever seen the movie?
No.
No? Have you seen it, Michael?
Yes, I have.
You
I
have.
have a lot to say about it.
Oh, really?
How many times have you seen it, Michael?
I've seen it twice.
Nice, nice. So good. You can remember in detail, I'm sure, the scenes.
Unfortunately.
Oh, wow. So leading up to the film, there was a lot of press on it. And for me, just looking at it, I saw the headlines and I'm like, okay, that's for me to run in the opposite direction. But the opposite effect happened.
Right.
All these headlines were showing in the news, and it seems like it helped the movie because it's like one of the biggest movies of 2019, despite its controvery.
I mean, their marketing machine was out like crazy because our feed was just, it was like every other video was about the Joker.
Yeah.
I mean, you just saw it everywhere. So, for a little film like this to be promoted so heavily is pretty amazing to me.
It made a grip load of money, didn't it?
I think it did.
On a low budget.
Wasn't it the #1 rated R movie?
I think this is like
number
budget
7 or
budget to
Income
I can't
ratio.
even think. Yeah,
or
to
whatever you
income
call it.
ratio. I think it was greater than Deadpool
Wow.
Wow.
because Deadpool was
Deadpool,
like
yes.
even ratio, because Deadpool was a $80 million film.
Wow.
The first one.
Interesting.
But I think Joker was less than that, wasn't it? I think it was like 60 or something like that.
Wow.
And it outperformed that. So like they really made a lot.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at these headlines. Joker draws a direct connection between mental health and violence, says Insider. And then families in Aurora shooting victims expressed concerns about Joker in a letter directly to Warner Brothers. They sent a letter to Warner Brothers.
Wow.
Undercover police officers in theaters as Warner Brothers Joker opens.
Wow.
Wow.
Joker didn't incite violence, but it sure inspired paranoia and stupidity.
Stupidity.
Okay.
Joker audience flees cinema after man shouts Allahu Akbar. Is that familiar to you guys?
Allah Akbar, that's a Muslim thing.
In possible robbery attempt. Going back to the stupidity and paranoia.
Wow.
Wow.
Joker is the 4th highest grossing DC movie ever internationally.
Wow.
Wow.
What would be the #1? Do you know?
Yeah.
So the #1 DC film of all time, I just looked it up. It's actually Aquaman.
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 I would have not expected that.
Really? Interesting.
I guess it's the story.
What?
Yeah.
No.
I just looked it up. You can Google it. Like
Yeah.
Like, is that box
know.
office mojo?
This is like highest grossing movie ever. DC's highest grossing movie ever.
Joker viewers around the world walk out of cinemas and urge film banned. And I actually wanted to read a review for you guys. Someone said, "It's too terrifying. Joker viewers around the world walk out of movie theaters and urge cinemas to ban the ultra-violent film, saying it glamorizes gun crime and deals with mental health issues in a triggering way."
Wow. So I was seeing these reviews about that fans were walking out, and I thought that was, different, because usually, a fan's going to stick around no matter what. And so I was like, man, this is really messed up. So I started looking in my feed, and I saw other people sharing this, article about it being triggering, and I started looking at the comments, and there were people in there saying, like, they were conversating, like, is this safe to take my kids to? And some people were like, I wouldn't ever go see it myself. And some were like, well, my daughter's 13, and I think she's mature enough. And it's pretty crazy. These are adults walking out, and I was seeing people talking about taking their kids to see this.
13.
But it's rated R, right?
Yeah, it's an R-rated film.
So the MPAA.
In my opinion, you could be 45 years old and still not be mature enough to see this movie.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
The MPAA does not recommend that you take a child to a rated R film.
Yeah.
For good reasons.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. There's a reason why there's a rating on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I did see them say, some of the comments were like, yeah, there was way too many kids in that theater.
Yeah.
They were in there.
Oh, yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. So fans weren't the only ones walking out of things. The actors themselves walked out of interviews over certain questions that were
That's
directed
true.
toward them.
Joaquin Phoenix may play a man with an uncontrollable cackle in director Todd Phillips' Joker, but he certainly wasn't laughing in an interview about the dark and gritty comic book movie. Phoenix, who stars as failed comedian Arthur Fleck in the Joker origin story film releasing on October 4th, sat down for an interview with The Telegraph's Robbie Collin. During the conversation, Collin asked Phoenix if he was worried that his performance might inspire real-world copycat killers. The question apparently took Phoenix by surprise. Phoenix reportedly replied, "Why? Why would you? No. No." According to Collin, Phoenix then stood up, shook his hand, and left the interview. Roughly an hour later, largely spent talking with Warner Brothers' PR team, Phoenix returned to finish the interview. The actor explained that he left because he had never considered the possibility and needed time to try and figure out an appropriate response. But the interview concluded without Phoenix answering the question.
And the director, Todd Phillips, he also tried to avoid answering it. Instead of just coming out and talking about it, he pointed the finger at other films that are probably more violent that are not stirring so much controversy.
I think that, Aurora is obviously a horrible situation, but even that is not something you blame on the movie. And quite frankly, if you do your own research about Aurora, that gentleman wasn't even going in as Joker. That was misreported. His hair was dyed red. He was having obviously a mental breakdown, and there's something horrifying about it, but it wasn't related to it outside of the fact that it happened at a movie theater. But this is not the thing that the movie is trying to represent. This is not the movie still takes place in a fictional world. It can have real world implications, opinions, but it's a fictional character in a fictional world that's been around for 80 years. The one that bugs me more is a toxic white male thing when you go, oh, I just saw John Wick 3. He's a white male. He kills 300 people, and everybody's laughing and hooting and hollering. Why does this movie get held to different standards? It honestly doesn't make sense to me. And I'm not saying John Wick should be held. I'm saying this is the movie world.
Interesting.
It's a good point.
He's bringing up some really good points. How is it that we're so exposed to such crazy violence, but then everybody wants to call, what was the trailer we were watching the other day where you actually saw in slow motion the guy's head blow off? Oh. Like some Vin Diesel.
Oh, he has a Vin Diesel movie.
Yeah, and it's like in slow motion, his head is exploding like a watermelon. Like, that's okay? You know what I mean? Like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, but just because that's the case, does that mean that we should just avoid the question?
And if you want to talk about mental health, have you ever seen American Psycho? That dude.
Right. I think he won awards for that.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
There's no question that Joaquin is going to get awards for this.
Right.
Yeah, Oscars and whatnot. Says the media.
Says the media.
Said the media.
I wonder if they're hopeful, in sort of a weird way, hopeful that something bad would happen, because that's just great PR.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, all of a sudden somebody walks out and now everybody's talking about that, you know? I mean, it was like on Halloween, that family that walked out of the Addams Family.
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder how much, like, I mean, I hope that did some good with people going, I don't want to expose my kids to this, but I wonder if it also works on the reverse side as well. People want to go see it because they're like, dude, if people are walking out of this movie, you know.
That's what I'm wondering. If it's so bad, like, how's it making so much money? I mean, it only makes money because people go and see it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
So if so many people are walking out
yeah.
and saying this is terrible,
Well, I
why
saw
are so many people going?
I saw people sharing that article about it being triggering of people walking out, and most of the ones that shared it said, I'd had no desire to even watch this movie, except now I do.
Yeah.
People want to see it because it's that bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
It's the controversy.
reading
So-
the articles, it's like they're saying it's bad because of gun violence. It's bad because it's triggering to mental health, but it's not really saying why. So it's probably out of curiosity that people
I
are
mean,
going to see it.
there's a lot of movies with gun violence, though, and I think like that clip we played during the video game talk with Ben Shapiro. You know, it's like we're exposed to an incredible amount of violence. That doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's going to go out and cause that violent act. I really I believe that, but I think that there's a like a minority of people that potentially could, and this could just kick them over the edge.
Yeah.
So if they're sympathizing or they're what do you call
Identifying.
it? Like, identifying with the main character and saying, "Wow, I'm like that too." That could be enough to push someone over the edge. That's what I would.
Well, then the
I'd say.
question is, because of that small group, should we ban the movie for the large population?
That's
the larger
where it
population?
gets tricky.
Yeah.
well, now you're getting into free speech.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Michael, I want to hear a little bit of your background before we get into this. Share with the audience, for those that may be watching, you know, talk a little bit about maybe your experience with comic books, if you can.
All right. Well, so growing up, the first thing I ever saw, comic book wise, was Spider-Man. Actually, Spider-Man was the one thing that helped me get to the point where I could find Christ. But throughout this whole time, I really fell in love with the idea of people trying to save people with these godlike powers. Anyways, through that, I found out about Batman, who honestly is my least favorite superhero. Anybody who likes Batman's gonna hate me for that. And then finding out about the Joker. My whole life before Christ was pretty much dictated by comics. And even then, I knew that the Joker was not a good character. Like, very well written and obviously a fan favorite, but not a good character. This guy has 3 different people all dressing up as the Joker, claiming to be the Joker, and all having different identities and all this type of stuff. And this character is just nuts in general. He's overtaken Arkham Asylum and created a form of an anti-Justice League with the help of Lex Luthor. It's just not a fun time. And so...
And he doesn't have a
I don't know if
definitive
that's-
origin, does he? Like, no one knows where he came from?
So that's what I was
find
going to
it
get into with the movie. When it comes to the movie, this is a potential origin story. The Joker doesn't have a real name. He doesn't have a real origin. In the comic book, Batman Killing Joke, the Joker says, if I'm going to have an origin, I prefer it to be multiple choice. He doesn't even remember it himself.
Wow.
And so sometimes his name is Jack Napier, as we see in the 1989 film. Sometimes his name is Joe Kerr, Joekerr. Sometimes it's even Joe Chill, who is the man who killed Batman's parents. And so this movie gives him a new name, Arthur Fleck, and gives a whole new dynamic. It's kind of similar to the Killing Joke origin, but in this one, he's semi-taking care of his mother, where in the Killing Joke, he was trying to make sure his wife and future child were safe. This movie is one of the darkest things I've ever seen.
Wow.
And it really, I would not suggest it to anybody.
You want to give us a
And
summary of the film?
I would more than
The highly
I don't want to,
PG
but I'm going to.
PG version of the summary of the film.
This movie goes like this. Arthur Fleck, who is the character we will from here on out refer to as the Joker, is a comedian. He wants to be a comedian, but he's working as a clown. And he is constantly being beaten on. Not too dissimilar to, what I've been through or what other people who've been beaten on have gone through. He's in a bad part of the neighborhood, and therefore it makes sense for this type of crime to occur to him. And so one of his, co-workers gives him a gun. They are not allowed to have guns in his job because they're constantly going to children's hospitals and performing as clowns. So he has this gun, and while he's performing, it drops. And therefore, because it drops, he gets fired. He's down on his luck now. He's still living with his mom. And then he sees these people beating on this girl. Not really so much as beating, but verbally assaulting her. And he starts laughing, not because he thinks it's funny, but because he has a mental condition where he's forced to laugh. So we're led to believe that. Later we find out that it was a thing that his mother told him because he would constantly laugh in inappropriate situations.
Wow.
So they turn their attention to him, beat him up, and he shoots them.
Wow.
Because, they found the gun. And then this leads to a whole spiral of events. In the end, he kills the host of a show that he idolized. And throughout this, you're not even sure what is real or fake. You don't know.
Oh, wow.
In terms of his
I mean,
life
he's
and
making-
the events?
He's making it up in his mind?
Yes, he has schizophrenia. Well, pseudo-schizophrenia, as I said in the podcast. He has pseudo-schizophrenia. He has depression, manic depression, and obviously he's some sort of psycho. If his mom had to lie and tell him that he has a mental condition where he just laughs at random points. He even has a card to show it, like, why do you think this is funny? He pulls out a card, says, please excuse me, I have a mental condition.
Wow.
And what are
It's
people's
laminated,
response to
and
that
it
in the
doesn't look like a
movie?
doctor's note either.
Yeah.
What are people's response to the card in the movie?
Some people are like, okay. Other people are like, this is falsified, this is garbage, and then they just start beating him up. At some points, he can't even get the card out, and then they're just like, oh, you think this is funny? Kick his butt.
I guess that's pretty accurate to society today, how there's like this taboo or stigma around mental health, even when there's
Yeah.
proof like, hey, that I struggle with something,
Yeah.
the response may not be what we would like. Yeah. But this sounds like the case of the oppressed becoming the oppressor. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely that way.
But what made it so dark? I mean, why is it so disturbing?
It's disturbing with the way that everything is shot. It's this really dark film, both tonally and like the way it's directed. It's always gray. There's never light shining except for the parts with his girlfriend, who you realize doesn't even know he exists, and he's been imagining it the whole time. And that's at the end, when you find that out, is when you kind of realize, like, what in this is true. There's certain things that point it out to be true. Certain things could be true, but it's like this weird limbo state you're constantly in, trying to figure out what is real and what is fake. But because all the parts that are most likely real are the violent parts, like the violent parts seem to be the only real thing, because here's a little moment of happiness and then somebody dies. Here's a little bit of moment of happiness and then somebody beats him up. Here's a little bit of moment of happiness. Oh wait, that was in your head because this guy is now calling you a bad word.
Wow. Wow.
So they're really taking the audience on a sort of a roller coaster of, up and down and high and low, and they're kind of, really messing with the emotions of the audience.
Yes, it's very much that. And due to that fact, I had to watch it twice because both times I walked out at different points.
Wow. So at what point did you walk out, and what made you like, I shouldn't be here? Or, I mean, what, like give me a little background to that, because why would you walk out of a movie, if people watching, we kind of battle this all the time. It doesn't matter, I'm not affected by what I watch. And yet here you are, someone who is clearly a fan of comic books and comic movies, but yet this one, I find it very fascinating that you were unwilling to sit through it. So kind of get to the nut of that.
So the part where I walked out at the first one was actually his appearance at the Wayne Mansion, the Wayne Manor, because of the steps it took to get there. The tone of it was so dark. He starts talking to Bruce, who's a little kid at this point. It takes place in the 80s. So Bruce is a baby, essentially, right before, it's before his father and mother die. So he's just a child, and Joker is talking to him like, I'm your brother, like talking in this very high-pitched, like eerie voice, and it's just it's not enjoyable with the eyes that he has, the creepy smile, literally sticking his thumbs into the child's mouth to make him smile, like, why so serious? It wasn't, sitting well. It was just this dark thing, and the way that everything was shot kind of made it look almost like a horror film.
Wow. Interesting.
Now, people say that this movie just brings awareness to abuse and mental health and such. What is your take on that?
It definitely brings awareness. It definitely does. But the thing about the fact it's bringing awareness is the way it's bringing awareness.
Okay.
Like, like this guy, he's clearly, down on his luck. He's lost his job, lost pretty much everything, and he's waiting for the end of the day to get that final cigarette in. Like, that's what he wants. But these people just don't care, and they beat him up because of it. And for that, like, yes, it brings a sympathy to him, it brings all this stuff to him, but when you sympathize with this character, with the mental health, you put yourself in their shoes. That's the whole point of sympathy. And the way he manages it, it's not a positive way of managing your schizophrenia or anything. He has to take drugs, and he refuses to take drugs. It's not a positive awareness of it. It's this is this guy who has it, and other people in the world have it. And it's more so not like, you know what, people have this, let's help them out.
Right.
It's people have this, and if you have it while you're watching it, you're going to want to go kill some people.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you sympathize with this character now.
One of the reasons that a lot of comic book fans like Batman is because Batman is like this most tangible human character that people can identify with, It's not like everything in Batman's life is completely polished. It's not like he's got it all together. And so a lot of people like Batman for that reason. And what's interesting is I'm hearing you talk about this. It's like, the Joker goes and the way he handles everything, it's like people's response to that isn't particularly great. But Batman has a terrible experience in his own life where his parents are killed, and now he has to deal with that the rest of his life. And one of the ways that he deals with it is he dresses up as Batman, and he goes around as a vigilante, exacting revenge on people who commit heinous crimes or intervening in other people's lives. And I'm wondering, like, is that really healthy? You know what I mean?
Well, I'm well aware of what you mean, and to be honest, this is why I enjoy the comics as a parable rather than something you should actually live by. No, it's not healthy. There's a book called Batman and Psychology, and in it, it actually shows the twisted psychology of a man who decides to become a bat to exact vengeance. It's not this glamorous or beautiful thing. In fact, his own twisted psychosis, watching his, mother and father die in front of him, actually creates his own villains. In the comics, he was the one who pushed, or sometimes trips or whatever, Arthur Fleck or Joe Kerr or Jack Napier into the vat that caused him to go crazy. He's the reason for Hugo Strange to be evil. He's the reason for Scarecrow and all these other characters. It's not a healthy thing to do. Sure, it's a bit healthier than, killing some people with a gun and just having fun with it. But it's not healthy because we are not supposed to have vengeance like that. We're not supposed to exact revenge. We're supposed to give it to God. We're supposed to let it go and forgive, which is something that this man cannot do.
Right. That's why God says, vengeance is mine.
Yeah.
It's true. It seems like times have changed from, there's just like a misconnect between comics and movies. I don't know if you guys knew, but when Joker comics first started coming out, it had, at the end of the comic, he had to be put in prison, or there had to be some kind of resolution or some kind of ending. He couldn't just run free. And correct me if I'm wrong, in the Joker movie, he gets away. Like there's no resolution at the end of the film. He goes through all of this trauma. He goes and kills all of these people, and at the end, he just walks away. I believe with like a blood trail into like this abyss of nothingness, as if to be continued.
So how it ends is he shoots Mari, post the show, and then he gets tackled by the cops and shot, but he's able to escape. And while he escapes, there's a whole crowd of people around him, and some of them you think maybe they're gonna stop him, make sure he gets to the police, but all of them either keep their clown masks on or put new clown masks on, all of them. And then they carry him away in a sort of, this is our savior position. Wow. And they go on a rampage, killing everything. And then the end of the movie literally ends with a guy in a clown mask walking up to little Bruce and shoots his parents. That's how the movie ends.
Wow. So all those characters are choosing to identify with him at the end and kind of like throwing their hat in, so to speak, with him, which kind of reminds me of like Guy Fawkes, Vias for Vendetta. It's like that same kind of like, you've got all these characters that are kind of throwing themselves in. They're buying into the ideal or whatever.
Is it kind of like embracing the mental health?
Yeah, they're embracing the darkness. The excuse for it in the movie is the people they're fighting against is the oppressor. It's the, billionaires, the 1%ers that don't appear to care for these people. And you're not seeing anything from their side. You're only seeing it from the Joker's point of view. Wow. So when Thomas Wayne tells him, listen, I'm not your father, what the Joker, Arthur Fleck, hears is, I'm not your father, get out of here. He's seeing it in such a twisted view. It's just not a possibility or a good way of seeing anything, and that is how the movie decides to portray the people who are trying to fix the city. If you know anything about Batman, from Batman's perspective, these people are doing their best to fix a city that is overrun by crime. But from the Joker's perspective, you're just seeing these people not giving any cares whatsoever.
They're making money off of it, profiting off of it.
Yes, profiting off of the pain and the suffering. The two people that were shot by the Joker in the beginning, the first two people he killed, were people who worked for Wayne. And Thomas is like, these people were good men. These people did nothing wrong or anything. They were the top of their teams. He didn't see what they did to him, what they did to Arthur. And so the Joker doesn't care.
Yeah. So thinking about society's response to this movie and the big argument, this movie or any movie doesn't affect me. I'm just watching it for fun. Does the brain really know the difference between fiction and reality?
I would say that line is certainly blurred.
Yeah.
I mean, when you just look at the topic of VR, like you go into any Best Buy and like I walked in there with my daughter and I wanted to try on the VR goggles and there was this dinosaur that walked over me, and when I went to go hand the goggles to my daughter, the tech came up to me and said, no, she can't put those on. Wow. And I was like, why? And she's like, well, she has to be a certain age. So of course, I go home, I start Googling this, like, what's the big reason why my daughter can't wear VR glasses? And they said 50% of everyone that puts those on cannot tell the difference between what's real and what's not real. Wow. 50%. And so that led into some research where, like, Cambridge and there's some pretty high up colleges that are doing research with it to try to help people over phobias, and they said the same thing. 50% of people that have like a phobia of flying or a phobia of getting in a crowd can put these VR goggles in, and in a half hour they can resolve that fear. Wow. So I don't, this is just getting into like the technology is getting crazier and crazier, but yeah, this stuff has to have an effect on you.
A lot of what I want to say is in this upcoming episode on media and violence, but
I love it.
I'll just say this.
Preference it here, yeah.
Like it doesn't, like if all this had no effect on you, there would be no need for ratings.
Right.
That's true.
That's true.
Right.
That's a good point.
Like, why do we have ratings?
Right, and there would be no need to ban this movie in other countries.
Right.
China has banned this movie, or it's not playing in theaters. Of course, they could probably find it.
You would not have armed guards at the theater,
Exactly.
like waiting for something tragic to happen. I mean, that just wouldn't even be a thought if people were like, "Nah, you're not affected by this."
And the reason for it is the government is trying to not add, flames to already big fire. We know the protests happening in Hong Kong and things like that. And Joker isn't the only movie that's not being played. Deadpool was never released.
Wow.
Deadpool 2, they censored it. It was a rated R movie. They brought it down to PG-13 by deleting some scenes. Wolverine, all these movies are not being played in China.
Wow. Those communists, man. They're like more on the ball than us.
Yeah.
What's up with that?
You're like, free speech? No.
But you gotta wonder why. It's interesting.
You do gotta wonder why. Michael, we were kind of chatting before we started this whole show here, and you had mentioned that you had maybe a couple of things that happened to you since you left the theater. You want to expound on that a little bit?
So I'm gonna start with this fact, because I didn't see anything about the lines being blurred or anything. Going into the movie, people go in being like, "Oh, this is fake, this is fake, this is fake," but going in reminded me of my PTSD that I brought up in the podcast with Mikey and Scotty. It switched. It stopped being fake for me and brought it back into remembering all the dark stuff that I've had to deal with. And so I had to leave. And going outside, it was weird. I literally had to be in the light and escape the darkness.
Interesting.
It wasn't this, fun experience or anything. When we left the theater, because I went to see it the first time with my cousins, when we left the theater, my hands were clammy, I was shaking. It was this dark, it was like I needed the Bible, and I don't go anywhere without it, And it was literally leaving. I had to turn on a light in the car. It was night. I could not be in the darkness because this movie, I couldn't. Me, somebody who goes in and pulls a light out of comics, out of the comic book movies, could not see past the PTSD it was reminding me of. I had to go back into the Bible and read the happier parts. I wasn't going to read Revelation. I wasn't going to read Ezekiel, where he's talking about, the sword will come down. And no, I could not. Because the movie was so dark, the Joker felt like the demons that I've seen before.
Wow, that's so powerful. So even after the TV turns off or you close the book, the effects are lasting. And you're not the only one who's gone and experienced this. Someone wrote, this is someone who watched it in Hong Kong. I watched it in Hong Kong tonight and came out to find the subway shut down because of the protests. It feels like the movie has not ended.
Wow.
And you think of all the people that have gone and watched this movie that don't share what Michael shared. I need to just run back to Jesus. I need to open up my Bible and have a connection. How many people are coming out of that with just these dark feelings?
They're just disturbed.
Yeah, and it's just compounding.
What do you walk away with this movie?
Wow, that's heavy. I just have to sit and think about that for a second, because it's there's so many people, Michael, that say they're not affected by watching these movies. And I tell you, I see evidence time and time again. Everything affects us. Yeah. I mean, we're hoping that people watch this little YouTube and get affected by it. You know what I mean? It's that's just the nature of this. It seems like we're all dealing with psychological issues, and when it's presented with this kind of false hope, there's no hope, it's this darkness, that's got to do something to society.
And it doesn't always have to manifest itself in a big way. The effect doesn't have to be so evident when you watch these things. Exactly. I saw a statistic that 1 in 4 people suffer from mental health issues, but it's a spectrum. There's people who can't leave the house, and there's people who can kind of go through the day, but they're still feeling down. So you aren't always aware of the effects that these films are having on you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Wow.
It's just not a fun. It's not a fun time. I hope people just watch this video and decide not to go see the Joker, because even now, talking about it, thinking about it, having to explain what it was like leaving, y'all looking at each other, I doubt you saw. I literally was I had to fight back the tears because it's not it's not a temporary thing.
Wow.
It's not a temporary thing. I mean, the government put out a warning when the movie was released to not go opening day because they thought it was going to happen again like it happened with Dark Knight. They thought that somebody might come in and do it because it's one of those type of movies. It's one of the darkest things. And if anything, the Joker might as well be the Antichrist in this film. He might as well be. He's a political figure now. He's, embraced chaos. He's the clown prince of crime now, and he's dressed like a mobster instead of a clown because he's in charge.
Wow. That's interesting. When I saw this scene in The Dark Knight when Batman threw the Joker off the roof, and it caught him on his left leg and hung him upside down, and the way that they panned that camera around very slowly, and he kind of had his arms stretched out. To me, I see Christ parallels in the Joker. For those of you that are watching and you need a further explanation on that, we created a whole documentary called The Replacement Gods. You should watch that, and that'll give you kind of a context of that. But I see some just twisted picture of Christ. I mean, here he's hanging out with his mother. No one knows where he comes from. He's this downtrodden, he's got nothing. He's the son of somebody else, and it's someone rich. I don't know. I just see all these parallels in there that it's like this kind of upside down twisting world, and it becomes very evil.
In the comics, remember how I said that there's 3 people who are the Jokers?
That's right. which is interesting.
Yeah, that stood out to me.
Yes, and I'm going to explain it real quick because what you just said, I was going to use your ideas, your way of looking at comics to explain it here. That the Joker definitely felt like he was attempting to be a Christ-like figure, and even I could not pull that into the light. The thing is when there's three Jokers, there is the mobster Joker, there is the anarchist Joker, and there's the clown comedy Joker. Here's how I would see it if we're looking at a Christ parallel. The mobster is the Father God, the anarchist is Jesus, and the comedian is the Holy Spirit because mobster's in charge. Anarchist is pretty much what the Jewish culture thought that, the Messiah would be, like somebody to overturn everything politically. Right. And the comedian is the one telling you to embrace the chaos or embrace God. And that was like, when I was remembering that in the movie, it was like, this one looks like all three.
Wow.
This is really incredible. The newest Twilight movie has already made more than $170 million at the box office. But there's a problem.
Yeah, we already knew these movies made tween girls lightheaded, but there now is a much more serious side effect, apparently. Here's ABC's Abby Boudreau.
It's a series that has millions of fans screaming with joy. But could Twilight's latest hit be hazardous to your health?
You're the enemy now.
Moviegoers around the country reporting certain scenes triggering seizures, like one Utah man who passed out and began convulsing.
I was shaking and mumbling different noises.
Same thing happened to Brandon Gephardt in California.
Next thing I know, I'm waking up to like everyone shaking me and the whole theater is like looking at me.
Last thing he remembers, Bella's graphic birthing scene, where flashes of red, black, and white lights flicker on the screen, almost like a strobe light.
Convulsing and snorting and trying to breathe.
Experts say Brandon likely suffered a photosensitive epileptic seizure.
Red is one of the most provocative colors when flashed to provoke a seizure.
But it's not the first time people have gotten sick from their favorite flicks.
There's someone down here!
In 127 Hours, the movie about a trapped hiker, reports that moviegoers fainted from shock during the amputation scene.
Outstanding.
Even worse, blockbuster Avatar. One man reportedly died while watching this movie, his doctors blaming overexcitement. And in 2008, Cloverfield. A thriller about a monster attack in New York City. There's even a Facebook page called Cloverfield Made Me Sick. This guy writes, loved the movie, hated what it did to my stomach. So the next time Brandon's girlfriend wants to go to a movie, maybe he should choose something a little lighter.
Going back to asking the question if the brain knows the difference between fiction and reality, they were saying that someone had a reaction to seeing someone get their leg cut off. That's the body's natural response to go into shock in that much pain. But someone just watching someone in that much pain went into shock.
Here's the thing, though. Have you ever cried in a movie?
Yeah.
Come on, Keith. Keith's cried.
Probably.
I know I've cried in a movie. Why? Why do you cry?
It's your feeling.
But why?
The movie is affecting your emotions.
Right? Because you're identifying, you're
right.
sympathizing, you're going through the experience with that person that you're watching. I think there's no denying that. That's why people like going and seeing the movies. When you see these hero movies and everybody comes out guns blazing, blowing everybody away, you're like, something inside of us wants to be that hero that comes in, saves the day, and wins the girl or whatever. That's just built into all of us. So for those that really have a hard time understanding this point, you are affected by everything that you watch, and you're going to identify with it in some way, shape, or form. So make sure that what you are identifying with lines up with your Bible. You know what I mean? Does it speak the same language? Does it give the same outcome? When you walk away, does it make you inspired for treating your fellow human beings with more sympathy and loving them? I mean, a movie like this, Joker, I probably wouldn't be as hard on it if it was some sort of resolution to it.
Yeah.
If there was some sort of like, hey man, there's people that are really suffering from this mental health issue. Here's how we need to treat them. Here's how we need to do that. That's Christ-like. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I think just leaving you blank is the problem.
For those people who may have had Michael's experience. You know, they left the movie kind of traumatized and not really knowing what to do, and maybe they're searching online, you know, how to get over how I feel about this movie. Do you have any encouragement to those people, or what does the Bible have to say? Where's the hope that we can look to when we're surrounded by a world filled with darkness?
You know, I think the Bible's full of promises, and there is a lot of amazing promises that you can stand on and take that as you know, this is God speaking to us. He doesn't have plans to harm us, to hurt us. He has plans that we thrive, plans that we do better.
Jeremiah 29:11.
Jeremiah 29:11, nice, right on. You know what I mean? And I think that if we kind of began to look at, well, what is Christianity really offering? It should be this peace that passes all understanding. I mean, these are things that the Bible describes that God is wanting to give to us. So the more that we can you know, run to that, stand on those promises and say, God, you promised to do this for me. I believe it'll make a life-changing transformation in your life.
It's important for Christians to not just close their eyes to these matters, but to reach out to people and offer help.
What did you run to, Michael? What verse?
I was trying to find it. It was the one that I showed on the podcast. It was 1st or 2nd Timothy. You know, I've given you a spirit, not of fear, but that of sound mind, sound judgment. That was the Bible verse that I immediately went to, because if I didn't do that, my head would have been screwed up for way too long. John 3:16, for God so loved the world.
Amen.
Like, he did that for me. I don't have to worry about the darkness anymore.
Right. Jesus came to give us life and give it abundantly, not take it away. You know what I mean? The thief comes to steal and kill.
I found the Bible verse of that. John 14:27. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you, not as the world gives, do I give to you. Do not let your heart be troubled, nor let it be fearful.
I love it. Good verse. Good verse. It says in Psalm 147:3 that he heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds.
Wow.
So if we've been damaged in some way, God is there to make everything right.
Vengeance is the easy road. It's the easy road that leads to more pain. You know, studies have shown that the best way to overcome depression, certain levels of depression, of course, and other mental health issues, is to give selflessly, get involved in selfless service. And the church is heavily involved in that. So to try to bring more people into that, instead of staying in our communities, trying to bring others into that kind of service, it will be a big help to society.
That's right. And you know, I've watched a lot of videos of Holocaust survivors that, I mean, you can imagine what, like, some of these people have been tested and you know, done evil things to. And every year, the Holocaust survivors still, to this day, get together over there in Auschwitz and you know, they remember what happened to them. And there's even a group that goes, gets together and actually forgave all of the Germans.
Wow.
And they talk about their experience of moving beyond the evil that was done to them. And they've lived wonderful lives. And so, you know, forgiveness is a big part of it. I mean, who hasn't been wronged, right? Some more than others, but adding that forgiveness element can also help us to move past those broken feelings and begin to heal.
There was a guy who a cop went into the wrong house or something and shot the owner. Did you hear about that?
Yeah.
And the brother of the guy who just got killed said, asked the judge, can I hug her, you know? And he was a Christian too, you know.
Wow.
And that impacted a lot of people.
Yeah, that went viral.
Wow. All right, well, thank you so much, Michael, for joining us in this conversation. And for the viewers, thank you so much for tuning in. If you've seen The Joker or any kind of movie as such, and you walked away but were able to find peace or some kind of encouragement through the Word of God, please leave a comment down below with that Bible text, with that encouragement, and maybe some suggestions of better movies that bring awareness to mental health in a more positive and more encouraging way. We would really appreciate that. We want to build a community This is not just us bashing these films, but we're really trying to bring our own sort of awareness and to spread Christ, because he is the answer to these societal issues. Please remember to like and subscribe. Share this video to as many people as possible. Down below you can find all the links to our Patreon, to our website, to get some cool t-shirts. And we just want to thank you guys so much for tuning in every single Friday. We will see you next week on LED Live. Bye-bye.
All right, take care.